We're back, everyone. Devalued.
Is that it? That's our jingle? I love it.
Devalued's back.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Caroline. We are talking to legendary songwriter Ron Sexsmith.
And what a sweetie.
He is the best. Super underrated songwriter. One of my favorites. And this conversation was really beautiful.
Yes, big fan of him as a person. We talked about a lot of different things, from song doctoring to writing while
working
on the job. Yes. Nashville stuff.
Bro country. Why some people are super famous and others kind of wallow in its obscurity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great conversation, and I think we should get into it.
Here it is.
Well, we'll start with our favorite question. What do you think is the relationship between art and money?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't come from money. I never had any. I mean, my wife and I were able to buy our first house when I was 53, but I mean, we don't own it. We're still, paying a mortgage and stuff. But, I guess as long as I've been alive, the music industry, I mean, that's been a big component, record labels, they're hoping to make money. There was a time I felt when you could be sort of what they used to call a cred artist on a label who just, who didn't sell a lot of records, but got good reviews and you could sort of coast along like that, And I mean, when I got signed, I was under contract for about 7 albums. I just felt I was just so happy to have kind of a job, and I was always trying to break through because you don't want to be the, sort of loser of the label, especially on Interscope where everybody's selling millions of records, and I wasn't. So I think they used to, maybe they were just pretending to care about art and stuff like this, but they were really, the way they were throwing money around back then, even on someone like me, you could kind of see why the industry ended up the way it did. Because they would spend all this money signing someone, and then maybe they wouldn't even put the record out because they would cut their losses if they didn't think it was going to sell or something. So I just kind of shudder to think, just where I would be now if I wasn't able to kind of reach some people and build a following, because I never felt I had any real backing from the industry,
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you were starting out, did you feel that music could be a career, or could it be a way for you to earn a living?
I think that's all I really hoped for, is that I could earn a living doing it, because I wasn't earning a living as a courier, and I had 2 kids, and I really I didn't excel at school, so I didn't have a whole lot to fall back on. And I was quite old before I got signed. I was already like 30 or pushing 30. And there was a lot of people in my world who were telling me, well, it's not going to happen. You should maybe get a job for the post office or something. And I'm just really glad I stuck it out. But I just really wanted to be able to support my family, make a living, not have to do something else, because I mean, I did many different jobs over the years, and I wasn't really cut out for a lot of things. So, but what was the first part of that question? Do you remember?
Well, did you think that it was going to be possible to make a living? Because you were mentioning earlier that, these cred artists on record labels that like Leonard Cohen, for example, was someone that could, was critically well received, but never really sold a lot of albums, and he was allowed to have this great career. And that used to be very possible. And that's kind of when you were signed, when that system was still kind of happening.
Yeah, it was the tail end of that. Um, and I mean, there were a lot of, I just really wanted to be an album artist. All my heroes, you know, made records that where the album cover kind of looked like how the music sounded. And there was a very well thought of sequence, where they put a lot into it. And that's what I wanted to do. I mean, even Elton John in his heyday was really an album artist. He became more of like a singles artist, I think, in the 80s or whatever. And I think even Leonard Cohen, back when people did sell a lot of records, he did sell quite a few records. He was an international artist, and then obviously, I think in the '80s he seemed to, '90s he even sold more records. But no, he wasn't anyone you would ever hear on the radio. Um, and I thought, I mean, it's funny with me because when I got signed, my music, was just so out of step with what radio was playing. And I grew up a child of the radio. Radio was always my friend, except when I got signed, and then it wasn't my friend. you know, and I just didn't have that sort of grungy sound that was big in the '90s. I didn't have the look. That's the same thing in the '80s when I tried to get a record deal. I didn't have the look. I didn't have the sound. But I think because of, I always sort of credit Nirvana for making it possible for me to have a career because they sort of blew up the '80s in a weird way. I mean, the '80s was amazing, really fun and all that stuff, but Nirvana kind of, it wasn't about, like Pink and everything, crazy hair. And and it just made it possible for a guy like me to come through and just sort of sing these songs without any irony, and just sort of be really, like they used to do in the early '70s. And, you know, and, but like, yeah, it just wasn't what radio was about then, right?
I'm glad you brought up Nirvana because Nirvana was kind of instrumental in shining a light on some offbeat artists, I guess, like Daniel Johnston. And that kind of happened to you, right? That someone,
Elvis Costello.
yeah, gave you love, and then the rest of the world kind of saw that and discovered you that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of those shudder to think moments because, my album, when it came out, my debut was only released in North America initially in 1995. And it wasn't doing well, I mean, it wasn't being played. And towards the end of that year, there was all these whispers I was about to be dropped. And I just felt, well, my career's over and I hadn't even started yet. So when he held it up in December on the cover of Mojo, at that time, it really was like the shot heard around the world. I mean, it probably wouldn't do anything now if he did it, but back then it was crazy. The kind of people listened to when he said something, not just him, but other people. And then thankfully there was a woman at Interscope who they had just hired who really loved my record and told Jimmy Iovine, we got to get this guy's album out over in Europe and Australia and all these places. And that's where I found my audience really first.
So all those years of trying to get a record deal and then finally getting a record deal, and then having that almost snatched away from you, how did you keep your confidence and your spirit up and your belief that this was the right thing to do?
Well, it was so kind of, I mean, when Elvis did that for me, it was like vindication because I think I was getting pretty down that year because I was just on this endless cycle of opening for people all through 1995, in the States and in Canada. And, it's not easy being an opening act, especially when no one knows you or anything. And I just, I mean, I was excited that I had a record out and everything. And I would meet journalists who really liked it. And, Rolling Stone gave it a pretty good review. But I didn't feel secure at all. And I really wanted to try, and because of my age too, I really felt I didn't have a lot of time to establish myself. So, yeah, I mean, that thing with Elvis really changed it. And it got me a second album, and which was even kind of more well received critically than the first one, even though that didn't sell either, you know. Um, so it's funny with Interscope because I made 4 albums for them, but they decided not to release the fourth one, which was Blue Boy, and that ended up selling actually pretty well for me.
Hmm.
So I did feel like I kind of had the I don't want to say the last laugh or anything, but I felt that what I was doing, it was connecting with people, and I just think they didn't know what to do with me, you know. So
And it was obviously connecting with other artists because you've been covered quite a lot.
mm-hmm.
Uh, in my reading about you and listening to some things, you seem to have a very non-competitive spirit about the whole thing. Do you feel like that served you well in your career?
Um, well, I think actually I was quite competitive early on. I used to get really jealous, you know. I mean, Ryan Adams would put out an album, and everyone would be talking about that, and I, no, but I don't know I don't really know his music or anything, but I would see these photos of him, and he was so good at, like, he'd have a picture with a cigarette dangling in front of an old typewriter or something. I couldn't do
Mm-hmm.
that. I didn't know how to project an image, you know. Maybe it's a Canadian thing. And you know, because when I first came out in '95, I'm sure there were other songwriters around, but in a certain way, I felt like I was kind of the first on the scene of that new wave of songwriters. Before, me and Ryan was still in a band at the time. This was before Rufus. This was before what's his face over in England, David. Drawn a blank on his name, but there were, you know, after a year or two, all of a sudden there was all these other songwriters, and they all seemed to look cooler than I did, and get sort of a buzz going, you know, faster than me. So yeah, I was quite competitive, only because I never quite felt secure, and I just really wanted to hit it out of the park one of those days, and to the point where the label had some kind of value, you know, valued me in some ways. But it's funny now, though, I don't feel competitive at all. Like, I feel like now I'm on the service road of the music industry. You know what I mean? Like, when I put out a record, I'm not worried what's everybody else doing, or, um, so, so yeah, but I think, uh, you know, I've always been pretty easygoing, but I do think I was relatively competitive in the early days. So.
And as a songwriter,
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at when you say you're not competitive, and you're looking at like Ryan Adams and all these other dudes that are trying to be songwriters, the craft of songwriting, I would imagine that the success of it is when other artists of note, like Rod Stewart and Feist and all these people, cover your songs, and that would probably be the highest honor that a songwriter can have, right?
Yeah, and I mean, initially, that's kind of what I could hang my hat on. You know, like when Rod Stewart did it, or you know, Katie Lang, or whoever it was, because for me, it's funny because I worked so hard on the songs. You know, before I had my record deal, and then when I got my record deal, I realized I hadn't put any thought into what I should look like or wear, dress, or anything. You know, I felt like, well, what now? Is this hat okay or whatever? You know, I was always wondering if I looked okay and stuff like that. But the song has always been the most important thing, and I wanted to be that kind of artist, like Randy Newman or something, who you could cover his songs, and even when you hear Dusty Springfield doing a Randy Newman song, you know it's a Randy Newman song because it's in his point of view, and it's in his kind of chord progressions. And that's true of, you know, Warren Zevon, or, you know, if anybody like that, anyone who kind of has a point of view and a kind of a serious mind at work, you know. And you can definitely hear that, you know, with Joni songs, or with Laura Nyro songs, and Bill Withers. I mean, so that's the kind of songwriter I wanted to be. I mean, in a way, I always felt that I was the best person to sing my own songs, but it's just so flattering when you hear somebody else doing it, that it could be the worst version you ever heard, but you're still really flattered that they're trying, So yeah.
And what do you think is your point of view, or the thing that makes you special? And when did you realize that you had that?
I always felt kind of like as a kid, a bit of a weirdo, really. I mean, I used, yeah, I mean, I had a detective agency, when I was a kid. You know what I mean? I was like, and we actually got hired to solve a crime once, to find a lady's watch. And
Did you solve it?
no, we didn't.
That's okay.
But we spent a few hours looking for it. But that's the kind of kid I was, and I was very God conscious as a kid. I was the only one in my family that went to church, because I was just really curious. And I used to, I mean, I had this idea, and maybe it's true, that God is in the sun. And so I would talk to the sun. I thought, well, how else could it or whatever keep an eye on everything down here? And the sun is everywhere and stuff. So I'd walk to school and I'd be like, hey, there you are. How's, whatever, like nothing, nothing important, just small talk, really. So I was kind of, sort of, and a music freak. I was just that's all I was interested in. I didn't play sport. I mean, I played soccer, but I never watched it or anything. I was just really glued to the radio, and my mom let me play her records. Some parents won't let their kids touch the records and stuff. But even in terms of finding a point of view, it wasn't until, I was 21 before I really started writing songs. And I think what happens is, I played the bars for years doing cover songs. And also, by then, a lot of the music, I grew up, Ray Davies and all these people, it sort of it was in my DNA. And I realized at a certain point that I'm Canadian, and my sound kind of lies somewhere between the folky stuff of Leonard Cohen and Gordon and the British invasion stuff. And that's sort of where I made my sort of nest, in a way. And I kind of found I don't even know if I found my point of view, but I just think I realized that I'm not good at this sort of thing, but I'm pretty good at that. And you just sort of whittle away at it until you find your artistic voice. And I think I found, and by the time my first record came out, like I say, I was pretty old. So I'm glad they didn't sign me when I was 22 or 24. I think you would have heard way more bad songs, I think. So.
Well, I don't know if that's true, because on your new album, the Vivian line, that one song I think it's from your early career, the Diamond Wave, is just as good as anything else on the album, and it's one of my favorite songs from you in general.
Yeah, that's from 1988, and that was one that I'd kind of forgotten about, because you write so many songs and so many get left off albums and this and that, and for some reason I just started playing it again around the house, and my wife was like, "Oh, I like that. What is that?" And I was like, "Really, you like this one?" And so when I was demoing the songs for Brad Jones, I stuck it on at the end, and of course he's like, "Oh, I love that Diamond Wave song." It made me think that I hadn't got any better since 1998 or something. And so I said, okay, and so we did it. There is an earlier recording of it from 1988. It sounds very 80s, and it's in a different key, and it's not anywhere near as good. But so I think I was able to, it sort of made more sense, I think, even lyrically to me now than it did then. So, yeah.
I read something earlier about you writing on your job, kind of writing in your mind while you were working as courier. And I was thinking maybe that came over from your internal thoughts, your God talk, maybe. That was a transition. You already had thoughts going in your mind. But I wondered if you thought, so that job is not music related, really, no. But you could exercise your creativity on the job. Would you recommend that for other creatives, or do you feel like that's kind of just something that happened for you, luckily.
Um, I I would recommend it. I mean, I think even when I first got the job, I was aware that John Prine, I think, was a
Yeah.
mailman,
Yes.
and I'd heard
Big
somewhere,
Prine girl.
yeah. Well, I'd heard even that Burt Bacharach liked to write when he was walking around, like his
Hmm.
melody. And I find too, just by nature of walking or doing something kind of mindless, I tend to hum to myself. I always called it like the Winnie the Pooh method. I kind of want to hum, I'm sort of always singing. So, and the courier job was really good because from 9 till 5 or something, all I did was walk around. And at a certain point, I was in this sort of downtown core, and I knew it so well, like the back of my hand. So I didn't really have to think about it. And if I was a bike courier, I never could have been a songwriter because you got to pay attention, right? Cars and stuff like this. But I would just walk around. Like Secret Heart was written on the job, pretty much all the songs on my first album. But the problem was I didn't have a dictaphone or anything like this, so I'd have to keep singing it to myself all day until I got home, and then I wait for the kids to be in bed. Then finally grab my guitar and sit in a corner somewhere and try not to disturb anybody. Um, so it was kind of amazing. I was able to get so much work done. But I would recommend it because I mean, I don't know what it would be like to be a courier now. I mean, I noticed they probably all use cell phones now. I used to walkie-talkie back then. And sometimes I would turn it off if I was in the middle of writing a song because I didn't want to be disturbed. And I'd be in a coffee shop somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was a gold mine, really, that job. So.
I wonder if it's what you're saying is essentially like daydreaming. Like being able to daydream is so important to the songwriting process or just being creative at all. And having that interrupted by the cell phone is probably robbing us of a lot of great songs that never get written because, people just stop and check their Twitter feed or whatever.
Well, I don't have a cell phone. I don't own a cell phone, but obviously,
Really?
no, I don't. But I obviously have a laptop, and I'm on Twitter way too much because I think during the pandemic I went into overdrive because I do like puns and stuff on Twitter, and I just wanted to try to be like Bob Hope in during the war, like entertain. So I was tweeting a lot of jokes and uploading videos from my YouTube channel, and Twitter's could be a very nasty place that, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be there, um, but it hasn't really got in the way of my songwriting because when I go for a walk downtown, I don't have a phone or anything. I'm not, you can't reach me unless I'm actually home, and I like that. And I think I see a lot of these songwriters, even like now, like Taylor Swift and people like that. I've watched the documentary. She's writing on her phone. Her lyrics are on the phone, and she's singing into her phone. And they go in the studio. There's producers there, and then I don't know. It just seems so foreign to me. Like I always went in the studio. There'd be a whole bunch of musicians. The producer would go, "Okay, rolling," and you'd play. It was like making a movie. I sound like an old man now, but that's kind of what it was like, and it was exciting, I thought. And I mean, obviously, it's a different kind of art form, what they do and what, Drake does and all that stuff, like I'm very old school, in every way. So.
Seems kind of like film photography versus digital photography, where there are
Mm.
pros and cons to both, but no matter how hard you try with digital photography, there's just some charm in the film that you can't quite reproduce. And so maybe it's kind of like that.
Yeah, and I'm finally I'm happy that finally some of my records have been put out on vinyl. I mean, even though they were taken from a digital, master and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not that sonically evolved that I can't really tell the difference if I'm hearing it. I mean, I listen to mostly vinyl here just because I have a really nice record player and I like the whole ritual, of turning it over and all that stuff. But years before that, I didn't have a record player. I just play CDs, and I always thought they sounded fine.
Well, uniquely, I think your records do sound great across the board, including the new one. It's
Thank
just
you.
absolutely beautiful production wise. I would say that one question that I wanted to ask you was have you noticed a dip in quality in terms of going from digital to have you noticed a dip in quality in like not being able to maybe have a record label allow you to have all the symphonic elements that you typically have on one of your records, which your new record is full of like harpsichords and woodwinds and horns
Yeah.
and whatever. But I would imagine that must be a struggle to. It must be like Orson Welles asking people to finance his movies.
Well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't, this album is probably the most lavish production I've done in a while.
Yeah,
But in the early days, I mean, my first bunch of records, the budgets were crazy big, like I was nuts. Like I would be in New York for 3 weeks recording in a nice studio, and then they'd fly me to LA to mix and overdub, and they'd rent me out an apartment on Hollywood Boulevard, and then I mean it was crazy, and there's no way you could ever recoup because unless you were triple platinum or something. But it was so much fun, at the same time. I mean, I really, even though as decadent as it was, just the and I was lucky at a certain point. I got signed to Warner in Canada, and the president there, he was a friend, really believed in what I was doing. So he pretty much greenlighted my last 10 records for Warner. And they weren't the kind of budgets I used to get, but they were enough that I could, my last bunch of albums have strings and all that stuff on it. And I worked with Bob Rock even, who was like a real big, slick producer. And we did that in Hollywood and Toronto and Vancouver. There's one album I did in like England, Havana, and New York. I still don't know who paid for that one, but yeah. So I've been lucky that there was always someone who would greenlight a record, and I would get a, a budget that was it wasn't always a great budget, but usually, all the musicians and producers have all had to kind of be humbled a little bit and come down because they just want to work and they want to be a part of something. So, but I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep making records. We'll have to see. So.
It's definitely getting harder. I think people forget that it's very expensive to make a record, and we've kind of gotten spoiled. I'll try to say that correctly. Spoiled. My accent wants to say spoilt.
I love it.
But we're spoiled in the way that music is accessible to us all the time. All the music in the world, all the time for what, $9.99 a month or some odd. And so it does make it very difficult for artists to ever recoup even an album made in their bedroom.
I don't think I've ever seen any money from any of my records.
Wow.
Except maybe the one I did with Bob Rock, because that actually sold pretty well. But even that one, because then I went out and toured with my band, and everyone got paid except me, basically. But I was having so much fun. I didn't really care, and I was, living off of publishing advances and stuff like this. But the thing about it now that's a bit, before when I was a kid, records would have this long life. They would come out, and maybe they wouldn't even take off right away. But then 5 months, 6 months later, there would be a single that kind of blew up. And then the artist would be out touring that album for the next year or something. Mm-hmm. Like I remember Sheryl Crow's album, even that first one. I remember it came out and I saw her opening for Crowded House or something in LA and thinking, oh, she's really good. But then wasn't until about 6 months or 7 months later where I think that single clicked, and then it became this really big thing. That doesn't seem to happen anymore. It's like an album will come out, and there's all this noise about it, and then on to the next one, and I mean, that's how it feels to me anyway. I don't know
Yeah.
how accurate that is.
Well, like
Um,
Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, I
yeah,
mean, I think we've all known that song if you're interested in music from that time period and that style. But then recently, didn't it win Song of the Year this
Mm-hmm.
past year?
Yep.
Because it got covered and blew
yeah.
up. And it's not even very different at all. It's just someone else singing it.
Kind of throughout the version, it was. I mean, I mean, I'm sure she was happy about it. Maybe she. I mean, I don't really know what she thought about it. I mean, I prefer her version. It was.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that moment when that song came out. My ex-wife and I were watching it, and it on some video show, and it came on. And it really kind of one of those songs that kind of stopped you in your tracks at that particular time. And and it's so I'm not surprised that it's gonna, it's had this second coming in a way, and I'm happy for her that whatever money came her way from that or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Yeah,
That just seems to be a rare example. But it does
yeah,
seem to happen occasionally, either through a cover or through a placement. Like
Like
Kate Bush.
Kate Bush.
Yeah.
oh, that was huge.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And you can't even plan for that. I mean, I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
Kate Bush didn't see that coming. So I mean, that's something I'm always, hopeful for. Like maybe there'll be some cool show that everyone likes, and there's one song, and you can, I guess, approach music supervisors and stuff. Like I don't know any of them, but yeah, it would be nice as I get older if something like that happened and it created a nest egg or something. But I certainly don't expect it to. So
Well, you didn't know that artists were covering your songs until you heard them, right?
yeah, and that's still the case. I mean,
Interesting.
my most covered song is a Christmas one called "Maybe This Christmas," and that's like no pun intended, but that's really like an evergreen.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just sort of it's the gift that keeps giving in a way. I mean, every year more people do it from all over the world, different translations. Um, so, and that's something I remember writing that song on Christmas morning, 1999. Um, Trying to write a song about Christmas that was kind of accurate, real, because it's not. I love Christmas and music, but it's not always a happy time for everybody, and there's a lot of family stuff, and so just the fact that for whatever reason, that song has connected with so many people really makes me it's probably the one I'm the most proud of, I think.
Yeah, it is a beautiful song. I listened to it today, and I was thinking about Shane McGowan too, because he just died, and he's always going to be connected to Christmas. And if people forget every other song that he wrote, they'll remember that Christmas song,
Yeah,
which is actually a really nice thing.
yeah. No, I mean I guess it's sort of what you hope for when you write a Christmas song, right?
Right.
That it'll be like one, White Christmas or
Right.
something.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
love, and I do. I mean, I'm a huge. If people think of Bing Crosby as a kind of just a Christmas guy, but I do. I mean, I love all his music, but he is, I mean, I think he might have done that one if he was still alive. You know what I mean? Like I just thought. I don't know. It's just the music of Christmas is the thing that I really love about Christmas, as opposed to buying stuff and all that. I just that's the only joy I get from it really is the music. So.
Right.
Yeah, there's something special about Christmas music too, and the way that the
Mm-hmm.
songs kind of become standard, and then you get to hear so many different versions of them from so many different styles and artists. I was
Then you
listening
got
to the
Oh,
Stax.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh
I was
no.
I was
Go
listening
on.
to the Stax compilation. They have a really great Christmas compilation if you are into soul
have
music.
it.
Oh, do
Yeah,
you? I need
have
to
it.
get it. I need to get it today because it is a 10 of 10. I love it.
It's really good. And then you got Brenda Lee, who's had a
Mm,
number one hit again from a song she did when she was, I think, 13.
mm.
And that's the song that, I mean, that's just the how unpretentious it is, and this how it swings, and how fully formed her voice is already at that point. Because I've heard other people do it recently, and it's all auto tuned and all that. It doesn't sound any good, you know. But there's something about this sort of weird period. There was sort of a cutoff point somewhere, maybe in the 80s, where I didn't really like the Christmas music I was hearing anymore. But all the stuff from the 40s, 50s, 60s is pretty killer, you know. And but again, I am old, right? So,
It seems like you're the rare kind of songwriter that is capable of producing a modern day standard. I mean, Secret Heart has definitely become something of that kind. Um, and from your new record, I think A Place Called Love could be in the same category because it's such a beautiful song.
yeah, that was like the last one I wrote for the album, and you know, and then it ended up being the first song. But the one actually I think on the album, in terms of that type of song, that standardy type thing, was this one towards the end called "When Our Love Was New," which again I'm even trying to sing it like Bing Crosby on the record, you know. But I've always had an appreciation for those, the Johnny Mercers and all those people, Hoagie Carmichael and um, you know, Harold Arlen and people like that. And I love musicals and all that. So it's definitely a part of my DNA, the same way that the Beatles are, and Gordon Lightfoot. And every now, it's not that I set out to write. When I wrote Secret Heart, my only intention was I really was trying to write a Buddy Holly song. Actually, I was trying to write something like True Love Ways, because I'd been going to all these open stages, and there were so many good songwriters who could write these folky songs that had 8 verses and all this poetry and metaphors and stuff, like Dylan or something. And I wasn't good at that. And it sort of made me take a step back and and actually go all the way to my childhood. And my first love was Buddy Holly. And so I wrote Secret Heart on the job, just being in the most sort of direct way, trying to use just the most conversational language. And I don't even know if I could write a song like that now, but at the time I was, and I remember playing that for the first time at the open stages. And a lot of these songwriters that I had looked up to, who never said anything before, were finally saying, "Hey, that's a really good song." So I felt like, you know, yay, I did it or something. And I've sort of been just trying to, you know, get better at it ever since.
It seems like you kind of have the perfect type of success, or what I would want if I were an artist, that you are well respected and well known within the communities of people who are actually interested in music. You have a timeless songwriting style that can translate, but
Thank
you
you.
can go to the grocery store and not be bothered.
Yeah.
Were you
No,
aiming for that, or did that just happen later?
I didn't know what kind of, I guess nobody knows what kind of career they're going to have. You know, as a kid, I wanted to be Elton John. You know, I imagined myself having hits and playing big arenas and things. But ultimately, you know, that didn't happen. It wasn't, I think as I got older and really into songwriting, that really became the priority. And, you know, but I mean, I get people coming up to me occasionally at the grocery store and stuff like that. But it's a manageable thing. It's never been like, I can't even imagine what it must be like for Taylor Swift or something.
I
Like,
think they have to pull a Michael Jackson and rent out the mall.
Yeah.
yeah, that's just like a ludicrous amount of fame.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand how that happened, really. You know, I mean, Michael Jackson, I could maybe understand that a bit more because he was this child star, but I just like, how do you do anything when you're that famous? You can't. You have to wear disguises and things, or, you know. I mean, we moved out of Toronto to a small town, and everyone's, you know, there was all these, I guess, rumors that I was moving here before we got here, but it was never a problem. I'm just walking downtown and people were yelling out their window, welcome, to Stratford, Ron, and stuff like this. So it was very nice, and we've never had any weird, stalkery things. And I mean, well, a couple actually, but nothing ever like. So yeah, so you're right. I do feel. I mean, it'd be nice sometimes to have a little less financial insecurity, but the fame level, if you could call it that, is totally. I'm fine with it.
We should talk about the finances a bit. That is the main topic of our podcast, after all.
Right.
So you said does most of your income, music-based income, come from publishing? Mailbox money, as they call it?
Yes and no. I mean, also, there's, you get royalties. My royalties aren't huge, but there were some years where they were bigger than they are now. I think a lot of my songwriter friends are experiencing smaller and smaller royalty checks. And there's also, I tour a lot, and not that I made a whole lot of money on tour, but the past few years, I've just gone out with my wife, and we're sharing a hotel. I don't have a band to pay for, so we're actually making some money for a change. Although I miss really playing with my band. And that's mostly a reality because we have a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. And I like playing by myself if the venue is right, if it's a nice theater or something and it has a real piano and a nice dressing room, then I really feel I can go out and do my job. I don't want to be playing a punk bar by myself or something. So yeah, but for a long time, because of the cover songs I had, like Michael Bublé and this and that, my publisher was very not generous, but whenever it was time for an advance, or if I needed one, I could ask it, and they were like happy to give me one. And you could live off, because I'm getting paid in pounds because my publisher's over in England. So you could kind of coast on that for a year and a half or longer. So. And amazingly enough, during the pandemic, when I was getting stressed out because there was no work and stuff like that, I don't know how it happened, but I recouped my publishing deal. So I was eligible again, for another advance because they hadn't given me one in about 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
So it was like a little, angel watching over me or something. So, but yeah, like I said, I make a living. I've never made a lot of money, but I make a living. And some years are better than others financially.
Yeah, you're still doing it.
We talked to Kurt Wagner from Lamb Chop. I don't know if you know Lamb Chop, but
I know the band. I've never met Kurt though. So.
He's awesome, amazing songwriter, and he was saying that he's had to pare down touring to just him and the piano player because it's financially unfeasible any other way.
And he used to tour with a big band, right?
Huge band.
What, like 10 piece or something?
I used to wonder about that. How does he afford that,
Yeah.
And even groups like my friends in the Broken Social scene from Canada, they go out, I don't know, they got 15 people on stage. I don't know how do they pay for all that? So
yeah, it's crazy.
And when I used to go out, I just had a 4-piece band plus, a sound person. And it was... Yeah, and I'm not getting big guarantees, so I mean it is. But I always was curious about these other people like Kurt, who would have this, all these moving parts, and you think of the hotels and whatever, the flights and stuff.
Right.
But so he just stripped down now. He just completely.
Yep. Yeah. Completely. He was joking that he has to start a nonprofit or just to get a grant to take his band on the road.
Because it must be hard because he loves those guys and they want to play.
And they're so awesome live. They really are one of the best bands I've ever seen.
Well, I'm doing a show up here, a big show. I'm turning 60 in January, but in February I'm doing a big show at Massey Hall, February 29th, and for the first time since 2018, I'll have my band.
Wow.
But I don't know. Who's going to, I'm going to have to pay for that somehow.
Merch sales is the only way that I've heard, and that's a fickle business too.
Yeah, and I just really, for this show, I really need my band there. But anyway, yeah, I think so many of us have had to really strip down, rethink things, streamline, and I'm lucky I can do that. There's some people that can't, they can't play by themselves. They have to have some kind of accompaniment. And so I'm glad I spent so much time in my bedroom figuring out the guitar and trying to, you know, get my act together. So,
Do you
and
think?
hopefully I can.
Oh, well, do you think that music in general has occupies the same place in the culture as it did when you were, let's say, trying to write songs and dreaming of playing stadiums?
Um, I don't, I don't think it does actually, but I could be wrong. I just, there's so many things competing for everyone's attention that I think for a lot of people, music is, they like music, but it's not their whole world. Where I remember just, I used to go to all these concerts, right, when I was a teenager and stuff, and there weren't even any screens or anything, like they have all these screens now. But everyone is so tuned into what's going on, and sometimes you see a photo from the band's perspective of the audience, the Who or something, to be some stadium, and everybody is eyes are on the stage. They're not on their phones. They're just really there for this thing, this big moment.
Yeah.
And I feel you go to a concert now, and our people are filming it, but not actually experiencing it as it's happening. And I would buy records and I would hang on every word and read the lyric booklet. Sometimes I wouldn't even like a record at first, but it would grow on me because I played it over and over. And
Yeah.
finally,
Yeah,
then
I
I
don't
feel
think that
dumb.
happens now.
I don't think
Yeah,
so either.
but I feel dumb for not liking it in the first place.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I do think it has changed that way. Um, that it's which is probably was probably inevitable. But I meet young people all the time too that are going back and checking out stuff and buying vinyl and
Yeah.
and really getting into it. So that's why I'm not completely sure that I'm right, but I do feel, yeah, when we were kids we had music and movies, and what else do we have? Television. There wasn't all. Now there's all these video games and there's all. So I think it has changed somehow.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Caroline, to toot her horn, she books for a venue that is also a record store here in Nashville.
Oh, is it Grimey's?
It's Vinyl Tap, but my Grimey's,
Oh.
we're tight. The record stores are all very loving to each other, so we love
I only
Grimey's.
asked because Michael Grimes was it is Michael Grimes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, he was my road manager for a tour.
Really?
Wow,
That's
that's
so
cool.
funny.
He was one of the funnest people that we ever toured with, but probably the worst road manager we ever had.
That is really great
We'll let him
Nashville
know.
trivia. Yeah. I could definitely see that. He's a Nashville legend.
Yeah. And your place is called Vinyl what?
Tap.
Vinyl
Like
oh, nice.
Spinal Tap. So when we answer the phone, this is Vinyl Tap.
Oh, when I played Hollywood a few months ago, and the guy from Spinal Tap came to my show.
No way. I just
That's
saw
awesome.
I saw a
Yeah, I
thing
didn't-
yesterday. I'm not sure if it was real, but that they were gonna
Yeah.
redo.
Spinal Tap
Is-
too.
Is
Are you
Paul
going to be in
McCartney
it?
Well, I don't know, but I didn't know he was there till after the show, thankfully. But he gave me a pack. It was still in the wrapper of Spinal Tap playing cards. That,
Cool.
I guess when they had merch or whatever years ago. So I'm never going to open it. I'm just going to keep. But that's exciting. I've been wondering when Christopher Guest is going to make another movie. It feels like it's a long time.
Yeah, it feels like forever.
Yeah.
We need those movies.
I don't know if you know this, but he had a TV show called The Family Tree. It
No.
only did one season. But if you watch that show, the end song was the closing credits. It's me singing a song that he wrote, and it's a really nice song actually.
That's
And
so
I
cool.
guess, yeah, it's him and his wife were that came to see me when I played LA one time, and apparently I didn't know this, but apparently they were, into my stuff, and so I was really flattered that he asked me to sing this song. And but anyway, yeah, if you ever see that show, stay till the end, and the song you'll hear me crooning away. So,
I'm sure we'll be able to find that on YouTube.
Yes.
Oh, it is actually, yeah.
One of the
Yeah, just
blessings
the
of
Ron
the
Sexsmith Family Tree is the name, and then I can't remember what the song is called, but it should be there. So, yeah.
So I have to ask you: are you optimistic about songwriting in general? About the craft of it, because you spent your whole career, trying to write songs that mean something and are gonna, live forever. And now that, we have Chat GPT and all these weird, bullshit, human aid
AI
things. Yeah, it's just, and people are already writing songs with that. Are you optimistic about human beings sitting down and writing songs?
I guess I'm probably not. I noticed that the Junos, which is our Grammys, the last few years, in the songwriter category, pretty much every single song is written by about 8 or 9 people.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's not good.
And I was saying they really should have another category, like a singer-songwriter category and songwriter committee category or something, and and then and I'm very critical, I'm about my own songs too, but I'll hear songs on sometimes that they have good things, good ideas, but I feel they didn't follow through with it. Like you're going along and, oh, that's a pretty good first verse, but then they kind of drop the ball somewhere, or just becomes this very repetitive thing. But because I think the things that were important to me about songwriting, it's just not what it's about now. It's a different thing, and I don't, and it's probably maybe as it should be. Like things are morphing, and I really care about song structure. I remember I used to write with people in Toronto. I was kind of like song doctor. People would come to my house, and I try to help them finish their songs, and yeah, and it was just, sometimes I think we'd end up with a good song, but other times I just felt we're not coming from the same place, and I don't really know how to do that. So, but I probably should be optimistic, I shouldn't be pessimistic, but I do feel the things that I gravitate towards, in a song and a point of view, a sense of humor, a way with words, way with the language. Like all my favorite songwriters all have a different way of getting it across, Some are more impressionistic. Some are very, conversational. Some people are good at writing kind of angry songs, whatever it is. Or some have like Warren Zevon, who's just got the strangest point of view. Coming at you from some weird place, and I love that. And then I hear a lot of songs today, like they just seem to be singing about, let's go to the club and pick up some girls or something.
Well,
or
country music's the worst of it all. It's just, pop country, I should specify. It's just alcohol sales commercials, basically.
It's like a grocery list of porch swings and beer and trucks and dogs. I go to this breakfast joint here where I live, and they have the country music station on, or the bro country, and sometimes I have to stop eating. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's terrible. Like, that's awful. And when you think of where country with Hank Williams and Roger Miller and Tom T. Hall, I mean, all these, they were poets. Willie Nelson. They were actually saying something, that was as high art as any jazz or anything. And the stuff now is like, yeah, it's kind of, and there's no melody anymore. It's all like kind of hip hop melody. And then the chorus has to say something like some play on words, some kind of dumb play on words. And so, yeah, so don't get me started on that. But
we're ready to go there. We live amongst it, and going down to Broadway and
Yeah.
realizing that the same people who are singing about alcohol are also the owners of the bars. So it's kind of this self-feeding thing,
Yeah.
all in pursuit of money, even though you know it's bad for people physically.
Yeah.
And just, it's hard to know if people care anymore, I guess, about how good a song is, or if it's just that everyone can catch on to it quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, and just like the best country music was so, I mean, there would swing, like it would just the word play, everything about it was great, and yeah, and we were in Nashville make my album, and we made the mistake of going down to the Ryman. Oh, and well, it wasn't. We went to see Jason Isbell, which wasn't a mistake, but all around the Ryman was this crazy like Frosh Week thing going on. I don't know what was going on. Drunken teenagers stumbling
Hmm.
around on the
Well,
back
they're
of a
grown
truck.
adults also, unfortunately.
Yeah, and just like what is? I mean, I'd made a record in Nashville in 2000, in the year 2000. I didn't remember it being like that, and we couldn't wait to get out of there and get back to Berry Hill or where we were staying,
Mm.
at our hotel. But yeah, so sometimes it really does feel apocalyptic. Like there's just this enormous sort of dumbing down across the board. And then when people, you wonder if they actually hear something that's really genuine and really good, will they even notice? Will they, if you got Nina Simone playing the piano, right? It could stop time singing just her.
Mm.
Can you get that from Katy Perry? You know what I mean? Like, can you get that from the pop? That's it, and not to put her down or anything, but I just mean it's like, Bob Dylan could stand up there at Royal Albert Hall with just his guitar in the '60s, and everyone was hanging on every word, and I just feel there's so much smoke and mirrors and so much, that distract, like there's so much over singing affectation. It's like there's so much over singing to hide the fact that there's no melody there,
Mm.
or so, could get very discouraged, when thinking about it or listening to some of the stuff that's popular now or that they call music, because it doesn't move me. There's no nutrition there for me, and that's what you want. You want something that's going to be thought provoking, like something with the nice that going to move this moves you somehow. So
I
yeah,
know Mike's not a huge fan of Jason, but I do think Jason Isbell is a glimmer of hope that maybe songwriting is still important to some people,
yeah.
Well,
because
Well,
he's
I
doing
don't, I don't,
well.
I don't know his music at all, but
Oh, really?
we're sort of Twitter friends, and we had a night off, and I noticed that he was playing, and so I just took a chance and I sent him a message. Hey, any chance of is there like a guest list? And he wrote me right back and put us on the list. And we enjoyed the show, but we were really blown away by the opening act. This woman named Joy Aladakun. I don't know if you know
Mm-hmm.
her.
Absolutely.
And we were just like, whoa. We were so glad that we saw her. And the next night, I think it was the very next night, they threw a party for me at the recording studio because it was my last day, and she came. I don't know what she was doing there, but we were so excited that we were like, oh my god, we just saw you play last night, and it was really exciting. Um, so she makes me feel optimistic, for the
yeah.
future. And there's other songwriters, like I really think Casey Musgraves has got some really good songs, and there's other people that once I get off here, I'll think of 20 other people that are good. Um, but yeah, so I guess there's always reasons to be hopeful. So
I did want to revisit the idea of a song doctor.
yeah,
That, on the topic of what we talk about a lot here, which is how an artist can make money without completely selling their soul. That seems like an interesting option if you have a real talent for songwriting.
yeah.
What did you do exactly?
Well, sometimes it actually was co-writing.
Mm.
Sometimes someone would come in with a maybe they had a lyric, no music, or vice versa. Other times they came in and they would play me a song, and I would, and all I would do is say, I think all you need is to, put that there, repeat this part, get to the bridge faster. So that for me was more like song doctor, where they had a song that was finished, they just didn't know it. And I would never call it, I've never taken a writing credit for that, it was just more like, and there were other times where I wrote with people where I pretty much did all the work and they still wanted to go 50-50, where, like all they had maybe one line, and I would just write it in front of them on the piano. Is this good? Do you like this? Whatever. And then they would record it, and it would be like a 50-50. And that was fine too. But at a certain point, I was starting to feel like a sucker or something sometimes. And then there are other times people come over and I was absolutely no help at all. I just was completely useless. And so,
I'm sure that's not true.
so now I prefer, if I have to co-write, I prefer to do it long distance. Like if they send me a lyric and I could spend a week thinking about it and writing music again, or vice versa, because some people will send me a track with no lyrics, sometimes no melody even, and I can write to that, so if need be. So
That's good to know that we have a friend in the songwriting business.
yeah, well, if you guys have, I mean, so again, like, and the other thing is I'm a Luddite. I don't have a recording studio at all, so I try to use GarageBand, and it's always a bit sort of crappy, but yeah, but I can co-write easier long distance, because it can be really awkward being in the same room with someone you don't know. And especially if they have high expectations for you to be something like other than yourself, and lyrics are the hardest in a co-writing situation, because you're always afraid to throw out some stupid line, or you know what I mean?
That seems like a necessary part, though.
Yeah, and it's what I can do that myself. Like all of the lyrics I throw out before I finally record the song is, I mean, there's some real questionable lyrics.
Well, I can Get Back, the Beatles documentary, where
Yeah.
I mean, they're singing the silliest. To be fair, some of it stayed silly, but it's the silliest things until they come.
So they get it.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing when you hear them doing a song like that and you're thinking to yourself, nope, that's not it. That's not it. So there's this relief when they finally figure it out. And the amazing thing about that film too is it all took place in 1 month.
Yeah,
Like,
it's crazy.
So all those songs that weren't finished at the beginning of the month, all of a sudden there they are. And it'll say, this is the take they used or something like that. That, for me, that movie was a miracle. It was like somebody saying, hey, we found footage of the Last Supper,
Yeah, right.
I cried throughout. I was very emotional. Yeah.
I couldn't believe I was watching it. It was just amazing. So
that's how I felt too.
Well, Ron, do you have anything outside of the Massey Hall show and the 60th birthday, which happy early birthday?
Yes.
Do you have anything else coming up that we should know about?
I don't know if there's anything you should know about. I mean, I've been doing in December, I do these Andy Kim Christmas shows. I don't know if you know who Andy Kim is.
No.
He wrote Sugar Sugar.
Oh, wow. Cool.
The Archies?
The Archies.
Yeah, the Archies. He wrote Rock Me Gently.
Yeah.
Rock Me. That's Andy Kim.
Oh, sweet.
He was a 60s pop star. Now he's older, 70s, whatever. But we're sort of like best friends. We became friends in the early 2000s. And he started doing the show Andy Kim Christmas Show. And it has all these guests and so it started in Toronto, but now we do Toronto, Montreal, and Calgary. So I'm off to Calgary actually tomorrow to do 2 nights, and then I'm done for the year. And other than that, I don't have anything else until the Sexsmith at 60 show, and which is coming amazingly fast. Like I haven't even had time to think of what the set list or if I'm going to have any guests or anything like that. So
wow,
it'll come together, I'm sure. Well, if you come to Nashville, you've got 2 new friends here. We're happy to
Oh,
show you
amazing.
around, not downtown.
Okay. What part of town do you guys live in?
I live by the new soccer stadium here.
Okay, I
Um,
don't know it, but
yeah.
It's a good part of town. And I live
yeah.
actually a little ways out. I moved out to the country, but I work in town, so I have to commute a little bit. But
And my manager lives in Franklin.
Oh, cool.
that's a very
Yeah. That's a
nice.
bougie part of
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah. Well, I noticed there's some really good restaurants in Nashville.
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
for sure.
And there probably always were, but this trip especially, like the food was amazing.
Yeah, the
So,
food is great.
but
We can
no,
show
it's,
you
it's
some places.
nice to know that you guys are there. So next time we come through,
Yeah,
So
I'm an East Nashville girl at heart, so I can show you around. Vinyl Tap will be our first stop. We can all.
awesome. Yeah, is that a used record store?
We have used records, yeah, but it's a lot of new
Oh,
stock. It's a pretty small selection compared to somewhere like Grimey's, so it's all very curated.
It's really great.
We love it. You can have a cocktail and shop for records. I don't know what's better than that.
I would love to just check that out. That sounds great. So,
Well, thanks so
hopefully,
much.
I'm hoping to get back there next year because my visa is still good for another year. So maybe.
Yeah, play some shows. That'd be awesome. I'd love to
Please.
see you.
Awesome. All right.
Well, thanks so much
okay.
for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah.
It's been great talking to you. Have
Yeah.
a good night.
Yeah, you too. Back at you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Devalued. For more information about our podcast, please visit devalued.show.